on the Interstate 231 detour off I-90. You're getting a different kind of show tonight. Welcome to Forthright. I'm Sulani Madsen, here today to share a column written after the Gray and Oregon road fires with a few additional anecdotes and commentary. To set the scene, on August 18th, 2023, two major fires started in Spokane County. The Gray and the Oregon road fires burned over 20,000 acres and 366 residences in the Medical Lake and Elk Chatterwick communities. The Gray fire affected our community of Edwall, with families who lost crops, had to move cattle out of the way while there was smoke and flame around, and who lost longtime family cabins and homes on Silver Lake. It also shut down Interstate 90 for 33 miles between milepost 245 at the Sprague-Edwall-Harrington exit and milepost 277, where Highway 2 merges on the Sunset Hill into I-90. Alternate routes were created on the fly to send all of I-90 traffic through Lincoln County. Full credit goes to the law enforcement officers and washed-out crews who had to figure it out in the midst of the chaos. This is the story of one section of that 50-mile detour. As published Thursday, August 24th in the Spokesman Review, fire detours test everyone's resilience. Any traffic jam tests drivers' resilience, and when drivers expecting freeway speeds were forced onto a single-lane country highway, it was slow-motion, barely controlled chaos. Interstate 90 usually flows peacefully through the southern edge of Lincoln County until suddenly it didn't Saturday afternoon. Closures in reaction to the Gray fire kicked off a parade through Davenport, Edwall, Harrington, and Reardon last weekend as detours were hastily put into place. Under Sheriff Jesse Allen got the phone call from Spokane County that I-90 was being routed through northern Lincoln County. "We had all about 10 minutes notice," Allen said. Allen alerted Sheriff Gabe Gantz, who was in Spokane at the time. "My first response was, I hope they're sending help," Gantz said. "Our number one concern was we'd have a pileup, but somehow we didn't have a single accident." Allen's initial challenge was figuring out resources available. "Our goal was no collisions and to keep traffic flowing," Allen said. Keeping traffic on the designated routes and off local roads took more staffing than the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office alone could handle. Allen said he appreciated the help from officers from the Spokane Police Department, Spokane County Sheriff, Washington State Patrol, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to keep routes open for emergency vehicles and local traffic along the county line. The State Department of Transportation staffed intersections at the beginning and end of the detours. There was nowhere near enough manpower to put an officer at every closed road. Impatient drivers following GPS-recommended shortcuts leaked onto one-lane field roads, putting themselves and others at risk on every blind hill and corner. Most farmers had shut down harvest. Thankfully, there were only close calls and no collisions. Drivers ignoring road closed signs were ticketed when caught. "We made well over 100 stops for people running roadblocks, probably 3 times as many, but we didn't open case numbers for all of them," Gantz said. There had already been an uptick in traffic on State Route 231 on Saturday morning as drivers avoided the area impacted by the Gray fire. Some large trucks struggled to stay in their own lane on corners, so the official detour, limiting 231 to eastbound I-90 traffic via Reardon back to I-90 on the Sunset Hill, was a relief. Westbound traffic was routed through Airway Heights, Reardon, Davenport, and Harrington around the closure. It reduced the potential for a head-on collision, although local traffic still had access to the opposite lanes. Not all drivers were prepared for the extra miles. On the eastbound route, there was no place to fuel up for the 32 miles from Sprague to Reardon, whether you needed diesel, gas, or an electric charging station. Westbound was similar, with a single self-serve gas station midway up Highway 23 in Harrington. "Some of the drivers understood, some were irritated there were limited services in our area," Gantz said about what he heard from business owners in Davenport. Safeway had a line to use their bathrooms so steady that employees were going home on break to use their own bathroom. Checking fuel and bladder levels before detouring would have been a good plan to be physically resilient. On Sunday evening, the traffic jammed from I-90 all the way to Highway 2. The resilient ones rolled with the situation. As we worked on temporary fencing across the pasture from the highway, we could see a young man with his window down singing to music. A woman popped her head out at the sunroof like a parade princess, talking to a woman in the car behind her who was lazily leaning out a window. There was an occasional impatient driver not quite grasping the situation. Sheriff Gantz confirmed there was at least one arrest for reckless passing. Some drivers stared ahead, perhaps contemplating their ruined plans for the evening. Others took advantage of the slow pace to enjoy the ride. One man walked his dog alongside the slow-moving car driven by a companion. We finished the fence and got ready to unload 230 goats. They didn't care that they'd had to detour home to avoid the fires and scrambled out of the double-decker stock trailer in an exuberant rush to dinner. "Best show ever," yelled a woman in a car creeping along the road. Being resilient is about more than being prepared physically. It's a positive mindset when life sends you on a detour. We've all been detoured this week. Embrace resilience in the chaos. So, a little bit more about the fire. Our district did send 3 trucks out on Friday in mutual aid, and we still had one out most of the weekend until the contract crews were brought in under state mobilization. Part of the strategy of bringing in outside crews is to release resources from immediately adjacent districts so they're available to respond to a fire ignition in their own first response district, either from embers spreading from the major incident or a new start. We tracked the perimeter of the Gray Fire closely as the evacuation area was expanded up to the Spokane County line and our fire district, monitoring radio traffic as our sister station in Reardon responded to a new fire to the north of Highway 2. 2 of our chiefs made a reconnaissance trip to check out the fuels and exposures if the Gray Fire were to cross into Lincoln County. Unfortunately, farmers in the area had harvested and they disked fields in several areas to create a fuel break, and that's a better term than fire break in a wildfire setting. You can build a physical fire break into a structure with a masonry wall or multiple layers of drywall. In a wildland fire, the goal is to reduce the density and continuity of the fuels to allow other equipment to come in with water, either by ground or air. And that's why when homes are very close together, there's fuel continuity, and that's why a wildland fire that spreads into a residential area can be so very dangerous. I and several of our crew spent much of the weekend at the Edwall Fire Station, leaving one of the bay doors open in case anyone needed help in our no cell signal zone. Not everyone was prepared for the extra mileage or to be off-grid, so to speak. We had people stop and ask directions to Coeur d'Alene, to ask if there was a shortcut, to ask, "Where am I?" The answer to all of them was just follow the traffic, you'll be fine. One young mother stopped, frantically asking where the gas station was. We told her it was 16 miles to Reardon. Her car told her she had 8 miles of range. We gave her some gas to get her there from the fuel tanks at the fire station. I mean, what else could we do? We heard later that the washed-out barricade at the milepost 245 off-ramp wasn't allowing people to take a right turn into Sprague. It makes sense in the interest of keeping the traffic moving to make everybody turn left and follow the detour, but they avoided having to add a traffic light or 24/7 flaggers, but it left people who were counting on getting to the West Plains for fuel, or who weren't planning ahead at all, in a tough spot. Because after all, if there's a town on the map, there must be services, right? This is not a safe assumption in many areas of eastern Washington, where requirements to upgrade fuel tanks a couple of decades ago killed off a lot of small gas stations that had been barely holding on as populations shrank. And there's no restaurant anymore either. Edwall is a food and fuel desert. But Reardon has services if you've got the fuel to make it there. As folks came into Reardon following the I-90 East detour, the first non-residential building on Highway 2 is the town library. And my friend, the librarian, told me about drivers stopping to ask if there was any place to eat. She named off the Speed Trap Tap, Dean's Drive-In, and the R Store, and received puzzled looks. Yeah, sorry, no franchises. Not even a ubiquitous Subway sandwich chain has planted itself in Reardon. As of the end of August, Dean's Drive-In is closed, so we're down to the one tavern and a small grocery store if it happens again. So check fuel and bladder and maybe pack a lunch in case of detour. Well, urban drivers were puzzled by this unexpected detour. Our rural neighborhood was abuzz at the sight of all those cars in a constant stream for 3 days. It was gawk-worthy. Bumper to bumper for miles in either direction, tail and headlights creating a river of illumination where there's usually no lights at all overnight. While we were out in the pasture fencing, there was one white pickup that I saw pass 4 or 5 vehicles just right in front of us. It was pulling a toy trailer with a blue dune buggy style vehicle. I could give a distinctive enough description that I tattled to the sheriff's dispatch over the radio. I hope he got a good talking to when he got to the Highway 2 intersection, or maybe he was the one that got arrested. But on the whole, drivers behaved well. In fact, the only emergency incident was an RV that had a fire in the undercarriage. Fortunately, other alert drivers in the line, moving so slowly, had fire extinguishers, and it didn't extend into the dry fields, leaving the responding fire crews with their biggest challenge be creating a small detour within the detour to keep traffic flowing around the now disabled RV. It was an amazing feat to pull off a safe detour, and again, my congratulations to law enforcement and their local and both the local one, the sheriff's department and their mutual aid partners for making it happen. And to all the drivers who survived the scenic route, may lessons in patience and preparedness help you through your next detour in life. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe for notification of new content. You can do that either with or without making a pledge. There's no paywall yet, but early subscribers will have an advantage when that happens in 2024. And the second floor, top deck. And the goats are making better time than the traffic.